Welcome, everybody. Can I start by asking you all what you think the sort of implications are for the advertising, branding industry of this conversation that Shailesh was referring to, this ability to engage with consumers wherever they are in the world on a social network or a particular platform?
I'll start.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. I think it changes everything, right? We went from the broadcast model to the social model. So the broadcast model was centralized and it expanded out. The social model is these nodes of sort of concentric circles of people sharing content with one another. So the notion of the conversation is what is the single most important thing in media today. It's about being a part of that conversation in a natural, organic way and creating something that people want to talk about. So I think it's profound, has profound impact.
Now, it's worth probably telling the audience a little bit about BuzzFeed if they're not aware of BuzzFeed.
I'm actually just curious, by a show of hands, how many people know of BuzzFeed?
Oh, that's pretty.
Yeah, that's
good coverage.
Yeah, that's very good. So BuzzFeed, we are the media company for the social age. We have 100 journalists, over 100 journalists on staff. 85 million monthly uniques come to BuzzFeed to find, 75% of which come to find something to share. So we view distribution as the social web, the Twitters, Facebooks, Google, YouTubes of the world. Every piece of content we create is meant to be shared. So we start from the notion of who will consume it, who will share it, and on what platform will it share. And 70% of our traffic comes in via social.
Javier, what about Google? I mean, Google's the sort of the original online ad company, or has developed multiple business models for online advertising. What do you guys? I mean, you have search, you have display, you have YouTube.
We have a lot of things
yeah.
that we need to deal with now. But I think the single most important thing that we have to think about is how the whole community and the whole audience is evolving, and how technology actually is changing our behavior, and how that change of behavior is actually changing the way companies need to change the way they access these people. If I had a word to define the way everybody's evolving, it's basically the word choice. We're seeing how online video is evolving. We're seeing how mobile is evolving. And at the end of the day, what we see is that people are using multiple devices. They're choosing what to consume, where, and with what device. That actually poses us a huge, I mean, when I say us, I see the whole advertising community, not only Google. Google is going to try to solve the issue or help solve the issue. But the challenge that we all have here, it's very simple. How do we earn the right to be chosen? How do we earn the right to engage with people? Since we're coming from a world of broadcasting, as you were saying before, I worked at P&G, and I remember not how easy, but how well defined it was to create a piece of advertising that was going to X million people, and then if the advertising was good and I had the distribution, there I got 3 more points of market share. Now it's different. We need to earn the right to communicate. So the way we see the future of advertising is very simple. It's no longer about reach and frequency. It's about earning the right to be chosen. And the earning the right to be chosen, if you're good at that, then you should not be paying that much. This is the way we see it. Because at the end of the day, if you're chosen, that means your content, we don't even have to call it advertising. Your content is a good content. And if it is a good content, why should you pay that much if the user is happy with it? If you think about the AdWord model that we come from, the AdWord model is not purely advertising. It's about putting supply and demand together, but always putting demand at the top of the value chain. Same thing I think is going to happen with the, let's say, media advertising or video advertising, in which if we value the demand, if we value the user first, then the supply will need to change a lot. And this is about, only paying for true views, only paying for things that the user has seen. This actually poses huge challenges for advertisers, content producers, and creative world.
So paying for ads that the users see. I mean, YouTube has skippable ads, right? So if I look at an ad, I don't want to see it. I click and I don't have to watch it.
Yeah.
And then the advertiser doesn't pay, right?
That's correct, and that's growing. It is growing, and actually we call it. At the beginning we called it skippable, but actually we now call it true view, or we tend to call it true view, because at the end of the day, we believe that you should not be seeing what you don't want to see.
But does this put pressure on brands to up their game. I mean, they're in a, they have to attract eyeballs, and they also need to rely on users on viewers to share these campaigns, these ads. I mean, they're not going to share an ad that they don't like or they don't engage with.
Correct.
Right. So what are the implications for the advertising for brands? I mean,
So I think there's a balance here between, there's been an explosion of content. The explosion of content on all different devices makes a vastly increased area available where we can effectively advertise. So the opportunities of advertising are absolutely fantastic and they're everywhere. But on the other hand, you've got to balance that advertising against the needs of that brand, the image of that brand, and who it is that you're targeting against. So the actual person becomes really relevant here. So things like content discovery, things like how do you use information about users to get better advertising becomes really important. And that's where the tie-in back to social activities and really understanding that customer and being able to use that information in real time to make that advertising relevant gives that opportunity for the businesses to take that forward.
right.
And I'll just add to that I think to your question, for advertisers that recognize that things have changed and organize themselves to deliver better, more authentic content that understands and acknowledges the audience, it's a huge opportunity to separate themselves from their competitors, to separate themselves from the general, volume of advertisements that don't really get that.
I think this goes to the point Javier said, it's about the value chain, right? Consumers have gone up the value chain. The user is now at the top of the value chain. Incidentally, Vietnam did this with coffee. They're the world's second largest producer of coffee, but it's a commodity, so they would put on the commodity market, the price would rise and fall. What they decided to do was do everything from grow it to package it, and then they could sell it for what they wanted. They went up the economic value chain. That's what the consumer has done. They're at the top of the value chain deciding what they want to see, what they want to share, and what platform they want to be on and use it. As advertisers, what has to be done is create content, create experiences that people not only want to engage with, but then go the next step and share. And when you share it, this implied endorsement to say, I like this, you'll like this, my friend, has just a tremendous impact on the upside for a brand.
Are advertisers responding? I mean, we talked a little earlier about the Oreo example with the Super Bowl. I mean, advertisers used to put out an ad, it would go on TV, people would look at it or not, that would be it. But now you have live, moving platforms like Twitter, and you can react to events as they unfold. So in the Super Bowl with the blackout, Oreo came up with the campaign, which was pretty successful, right? I mean,
Yeah, so for those who don't know, during the Super Bowl in the US, the lights went out. We had a little power outage problem, which Oreo took advantage of right away by sending out a tweet which said you can still dunk in the dark, and it was a picture of an Oreo cookie that was dark. Talking about real-time marketing that is as real-time as it gets. I mean, they did it minutes after the event. Now, the only reason that Oreo was able to do that was Oreo had celebrated 100 years, their 100th birthday, and they had made a commitment to creating content, a new piece of content for 365 days in a row leading up to their birthday. On the 372nd day was the Super Bowl, and the lights went out. So they had muscle memory. They knew how to do this. They knew how to take advantage of these moments, what I call sort of some moments are going to happen, planned spontaneity, planning around something that is going to happen, tentpole events that are going to impact your brand, take advantage of those, but then also have the agility to take advantage of moments that crop up when you don't know what they'll be. But take advantage of those for your brand.
Charlotte, are enough advertisers using Twitter?
I mean, look, we're pleased with how advertisers are responding to our platform around the world, including in this region. Very excited by the response. But I think all of us would agree, if you look at the facts, the digital advertising space is growing and has grown quite significantly year on year for the last decade or so. But it's still not fast enough. I mean, maybe that's biased, but it's not fast enough in the sense that there are enormous opportunities on these platforms to take advantage of audiences that want to talk about what these brands have to offer, that want to talk about and engage with these products. And in that sense, I think we haven't seen advertisers and agencies move fast enough, but we're really pleased with, for our own business, we're very, very pleased with the response. You saw examples like Pepsi here in the region that have done very, very innovative things with Twitter.
Yeah. What about measuring an ad? What does the digital world do for brands in terms of being able to measure the effectiveness of their campaigns, of the ads that they're producing?
So there's a balance in how you can do that. I mean, there's obviously the technical and analytics. How many people saw it? Which kind of devices did they see it on? Which kind of devices led them to follow through with an action? So there's the technical, how well did it perform in terms of the clicks through that it might get or something like that. But then there's also the social side of it, and how many times was it re-mentioned or shared or whatever. And getting that balance, I think, is what a lot of people are struggling with. I mean, technically, measuring it isn't that much of a challenge. It's actually using that then to inform the next generation of decisions you're making that I think is the challenge for the business.
And I guess a company would know that if their ad has been shared or commented on or liked. I mean, Jonathan, BuzzFeed's doing trying to work with advertisers in this way, isn't it?
Yeah. We have a dashboard that actually, if you're signed and logged into BuzzFeed, you can see on any editorial post, branded post, you see the same thing for a brand, but it's proprietary to them. The metric we care most about is the social lift or the social reproduction rate. How often is your piece of content reproduced across the social web? And so it's a number that we measure. The ads on BuzzFeed average a 30% earned media lift. That means 30% of the traffic is coming in by social. It's free, but it's much more powerful than just being free. It actually has an endorsement from a friend. But that's the data. I think what you have to draw are insights. I think data is worthless unless you can draw insights from it. What the insights are is to say, why did a piece of content travel very far on Twitter, but not as far on Facebook? Why is something really big on Pinterest, but it didn't get any pickup whatsoever on StumbleUpon, or whatever the case may be? It's understanding how content travels on different platforms. I mean, I like to say that content is king, but distribution is queen, and she wears the pants. It's vital to create really compelling and good content, but you have to understand how it's going to travel and how it's going to spread in the social world.
Mm-hmm. Javier, what about your experience? What about YouTube?
Well, I think on the measurement piece and on YouTube in general, I think that the challenge that we have, and we're trying to solve it, is to measure every touch point that every brand has with its buyers and non-buyers. So I think the future that we are foreseeing now, it's going to allow ourselves to measure everything that happens out there in the offline world and the online world and mix it all together.
Right.
So, things that we're working on right now is making sure that we understand how the behavior of the consumer goes cross-device. Mm-hmm. So we're seeing things like, 40% of the actions that start in a mobile phone end up being in a desktop. And we're also seeing how that action that is starting in a mobile phone that goes to the desktop ends up in a purchase offline. So the things that we're working on is trying to help the industry in the future to measure not only the content way of traveling, either it's queen or king. Well, I think that the king here is actually to understand how the purchase behavior is being modeled through how the touch points within the media world are influencing it.
Because distribution can be free in this respect, can't it? I mean, if you're relying on users of the internet to share and spread your ad, and it goes viral, like the Carrie ad stunt we were talking about. I don't know how many of you have seen the stunt that was filmed and put on YouTube to promote the recent Carrie movie of a girl, scaring people in a coffee shop with apparent kinetic powers. But that ad would have cost 20, 30 grand to produce, and put it online, and it goes viral immediately. Distribution is free, whereas once something like that would have gone on television, and the distribution cost would have been vast.
Well, distribution is cheaper. I don't know if it is free, but as we all know, every year we're dividing by 2 the cost of storing information in the web and the cost of producing and distributing that information in the web. That means that we go to a world in which digital distribution is going to be very, very, not free, but very, very, I would say cost effective.
Right.
Therefore, the content becomes key. Because in that world in which distribution and storage is very, very low, everybody can create something. Now, the challenge is how do you stand out?
Right. And how do you get your users, people to engage and share the content?
Yeah, you may be able to distribute your content seemingly for free, but it's no longer about impressions, so it's no longer just about distribution for people to nominally see your promotion or ad. Advertisers want a deeper sort of connection and deeper resonance with that audience member, whether it's a clicking through a link or whether it's engaging and retweeting the message. They want a deeper kind of relationship. And so the standards are much higher. You can get distribution, but is your ad any good?
Right.
And if it's not good, nobody will care. And that matters because on television, you constrain the inventory. It's a constrained experience. You're somewhat forced to watch the ad. In the internet, it's billions of impressions and billions of units of content, every moment, every day. So the way to rise above the noise is not necessarily only to be distributed, it's actually to be good.
And if it's good, then people will do your distribution work for you, correct?
Yeah. I mean, you have to create good content. You start with that as a base, but then you need to distribute it. When we're talking about quality ads, has anybody been on the internet in the last 24 hours in this room? Okay, what's the last banner ad you saw? Anybody remember the last banner ad you saw? Not for your company or a client, if you're...
For the record, no hands have gone up at all.
Yeah, no hands are going up, and there are several hundred people in this room.
Yeah.
There's been this industrial complex built around banner ads for, 18, 19 years. We used to see 40, 50, 60, 70% click-through rates when they started. Today, you're more likely to summit Mount Everest than click on a banner ad. Right? It's just, it's not good advertising, frankly.
So what's the, Steve,
Sorry, I was going to say, ads also, though, they don't stand on their own. Consumers on any device, when you're watching pieces of content, when you get an ad, it's part of the ad experience. So a single piece of ad itself needs to be intelligently placed within that experience that you have of that ads. Yeah. So we've got a lot of customers now who are experimenting with changing that ad experience, the pattern of ads, the number and the order that you see them, because they know something about the user. So it's not just about having the right ads, but it's sequencing them in the right place because you have an understanding of the user so that the package becomes a lot more valuable.
And can you get kickback from users? I mean, if there are too many ads?
Of course.
Intrusive, you're going to annoy your viewer who's going to, resent the brand that's in front of them.
Totally. I mean, this is back to what we were talking at the beginning in YouTube, that, we would like to see a world in which ads are part of the content. That will allow the product itself to keep being successful. We saw some data this morning, 285 million users in MENA. By the way, that was in the presentation, now it's 310 in YouTube. That means that people here in MENA are consuming YouTube because of that.
Right.
They're using YouTube because of that. It is hard to distinguish between advertising and content itself. And one thing that really strikes me out, and how many of you work in MENA, in the region? Say, that's why you're here. The point I wanted to make is, of all the regions I've been taking a look at and I've been working with, this is probably the region that has the most potential for this new world. And the reason why is because this is one of the regions in which I'm seeing much more uptake in terms of consuming in the new way. The YouTube way, the Twitter way, you shared some data before. However, on the contrary, it's the region which has less legacy on an advertising industry that in my world is old. Therefore, I think that here we're just cooking the new way of advertising if we do things well. It's a possibility. Some people may disagree, but I tend to be idealistic, and I am a digital optimist. And I think that the optimism can come in places where there is less legacy because consumers are changing so dramatically the way they do things.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. In regions like this, you have the opportunity to leapfrog a lot of the traditional practices and follow some of these principles, like making your creative good, being authentic in your voice and respectful to the audience, measuring and looking at data to understand the performance of your campaigns. Some of these core principles, they sound simple, but they aren't always followed. And I think in a region like this, you have the opportunity to establish your marketing behavior and your marketing culture from the beginning around those kinds of principles. Just a point on the ad format, if you look at Twitter, I think we're quite proud of the fact that the promoted tweet which is the central unit for our platform, you'll notice looks just like a tweet. Of course, it's designated with the word promoted, but we don't have ads to the right-hand side that are 300 by 250 or at the top. We've embedded the promotions in your timeline on Twitter with a proper designation as promoted, but that raises the bar and forces advertisers to have to make that promotion as good as the other tweets in the timeline, and we think that's a good thing for users.
And they have 140 characters to do it in. I mean,
Yeah, but can I go to that point,
Yeah.
Shailesh? Because that, in my estimation, that's native advertising, right? It's endemic to the platform, what you're doing. Nobody comes to BuzzFeed to look at the ads, right? They all come for content. When the advertising is content and good content, they're willing to not only click on that and engage in that, they're willing and excited to share it if it's good. And I think that's sort of the future for publishers. That's, Google, full disclosure, I spent 7 years working at Google before joining BuzzFeed. AdWords is native, right? You type in something and the ads are delivered to you natively. It's links and they're giving you ads as links. That is going to be the only way forward, in my estimation, for publishers to monetize their content.
Mm-hmm. Are we talking about the end or the death of TV advertising here? I mean, is there given the way you can measure advertising online and the way the greater engagement that is possible, TV just can't offer that, can it?
Well, saying this is the death of the TV advertising, it's a nice headline that I'm not going to give.
Yeah, you can if you want, but yeah, okay.
But what I would say is that things now are evolving faster than before. Because all this, if you think about it, we're 2.4 billion people in the internet today. That's taken us 20 years. It's going to take us another 4 or 5 years only to be 5 billion people. Therefore, all this change of consumer behavior that we've been commenting on, it's going to be faster. So I would not probably call it TV advertising. It's going to be video, I don't know, video whatever. Even calling it advertising is something that it's part of the old world. I keep telling my people in Google, why do we call this advertising? Because we're benchmarked versus the advertising world. However, it's about gaining the respect and the right to be talking to consumers through content or advertising or whatever we want to call it. But we are in the middle of a revolution. And in revolutions, as you know well here, there are shifts in power, shifts in the way things are done. So let's not say the death of the TV industry, but of course we're changing
it's got a
many
cold.
things.
Yeah.
And I'd say that it highlights a bigger problem in the way we think about this business overall, which is in silos. Strategically, we're at a point in the digital world where I bet almost everybody in this room agrees with what we're saying. The problem is not strategic alignment. The problem is operations. When we go back to work, do we change our behavior? Do we change the way we do work? Do we change roles and responsibilities? Do we change planning and budgeting processes? I think that's now where the work has to happen, that we align the way we behave and work every day with strategically what we know to be correct. So an example would be when we talk about television advertising, we talk about digital advertising, those should be planned together. They should be planned in concert with one another. Advertising at the end of the day is about aligning a product, message, and an audience. You want that alignment to be true across devices and across media. And so trying to take the best attributes of television, the best attributes of digital, and creating an integrated experience that aligns product, message, and audience in a way that adds value to everyone involved. Everyone knows that's the goal. The question is, who's operationally going to do the hard work to deliver on that? And I think that, for me, over the next 5 years, really should be the hard work that a lot of us do.
Yeah, I agree.
And we have an ad industry which is going through a huge amount of change. I mean, we have two of the biggest agencies merging, primarily because of the threats or the promise of advertising digitally, getting greater engagement with consumers. Is the industry doing enough? Jonathan, do you think they're doing enough?
Listen, it's changing so rapidly. There's so much change that's happening in this industry that are they doing enough? I mean, is anybody doing enough? The answer is probably no. I don't think agencies are doing enough. I don't think clients are doing enough. I don't think publishers are doing enough. I think the reality is that there's all this change happening. And what I view as the main the two issues I think are biggest for CMOs, and I read this somewhere, so it's not my genius, but two things. One is they're afraid of just being seen as checking a box, right? We did social, we did digital, we did all these stuff. We just want to check the box, but not have any real strategic thinking behind it. And the other thing they're afraid of being seen as is not knowing what's next, right? So they'll put very splashy, expensive ads on television or a very expensive billboard on the side of the highway because they know the CEO is going to drive by that billboard and they want to make sure that they see their company out there. That's not a good reason to do something, yet that's how we're structured and aligned. So I think there's going to be tremendous upheaval within organizations to sort of fit the new reality of how advertising, content, media is consumed.
Steve, we were talking about measuring and how the stars in the app. Was it the App Store that you were talking about before? I mean, do brands get this yet? That they need to? Do they know how to measure their engagement with consumers on social networks?
I think they're still learning very much about how all that works, and even more importantly, how that engagement comes back into the bottom line and fits back into their revenue models. Again, technically, we can measure everything. The opportunity is vast. The technology allows you to do stuff, but it's the business process. It's the understanding of how these things feed back to further the business that wants to use those advertising and all their resources. So, no, I don't think they fully understand that yet. But as things change, it's always changing and evolving. So once you get into that mindset, then I think it's going to be a lot easier for them to gauge what it is that they're actually achieving through that.
Yeah. We have some time for questions before we have to clear the stage. Does anyone have a question for our panel? And some hands down the front. If we have a microphone. Any microphones in there?
We can repeat the question if there's
no. You have to just shout it out.
There's many hands up there. Say it again.
Say it again?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. For the sake of everyone, here.
My name is Hassam and Nagar from the Thompson Foundation. My question is in regards to your comment that the ideal outcome is for advertising and content to become one. And I'm just curious, from the point of view of a consumer, is that something that is desirable in terms of how do you then distinguish between content that say objectively in its goals from content that is for the purpose of the sponsor?
Well, you're probably drawing. Thank you for the question. You're probably drawing a conclusion that I didn't give, but it is true. Well, on my view, we're going to see a future of less GRPs, so less advertising in the way that we've learned to do advertising in the past. And we're going to see a greater mix of content and branding, always trying to find the right balance. It's not about losing neutrality, but when I talk to CMOs around the companies, they're thinking about how to tell stories attached to a content instead of talking about brand attributes. I see more and more CMOs trying to own some territories which are actually given by content. That doesn't mean that everything is going to be merged. But I think that the industry needs to find a way to create it in a way that the user at the end of the day accepts it. Because if the user doesn't get it, then you're not going to get that story through.
We had some other hands went up. Anyone else? Over here.
Is it? Yeah.
Yeah.
This is Zainab. I just have a question for Mr. Rao in regards of the significant usage of social media. What are the challenges that Twitter have in terms of the content in regards of the business, let's say, industry, and the challenges that Twitter is facing with other social medias?
Well, I think my principal objective and focus is on education. I think anytime you have a relatively new platform, a new set of products, the key is how can you educate the entire marketplace at scale? Agencies, CMOs, the day-to-day marketing planners, media planners. who've all been trained to do something in a very specific way. So what I think about a lot, and what myself and the teams I work with focus on, is how do we educate the marketplace? Educate the marketplace about not only the value proposition of our products, but how to use them. I think that's what occupies most of my time. The interest has been phenomenal around the world. As someone who spends time traveling from Brazil to Japan and the Middle East, everywhere I've gone, there's been a strong appetite to learn more about Twitter and use it. The question is, how did they use it? And how did they use it in the most effective way? And that's what I spend most of my time doing.
We have a question here.
I'm Sam Richer from the Paris Sorbonne University, Abu Dhabi. And I got a question. You talked before about the product, message, and audience concept. I would like to know nowadays the consumer have to deal with groups, with the companies, the brands, the products, the accessories. I mean, don't you think it's a bit confusing for him to have to deal with all these marketing things on different kind of support, media, online media, and...
So is there too much advertising, and is it confusing for the consumer?
Like they have to,
Are we drowning in a sea of ads, guys? What do you think?
No, I mean, listen, if the ads are good and compelling, and it's moving a product, that's great. I think we might be drowning in a sea of terrible advertising, which is the sort of standard industrial complex around the traditional banner ad. But listen, if you ask people a question, do you want advertising or not? They're going to say, no, of course I don't want advertising. If you're going to say, do you want to have a free internet or do you want to pay for it? They'll say, no, I want to have a free internet. Well, the way to monetize is through advertising. I think the onus is on us collectively to create really good and compelling ads. I think that's where it has to evolve. But I don't think there's too much advertising.
I'll give you a quick story to highlight. I think this is the greatest era to be a user or a consumer because they have so much power. They can turn things on, they can turn things off, they can reinterpret, they can share, they can propagate. The amount of power, as I said in my talk, that consumers have today is unprecedented. A small story is a friend of mine had a little child, 2 years old, and my friend was watching television with his son, and the son, 2 years old, walked up to the television screen and swiped the screen because he wanted to change the channel, and he thought that's how you do it. So I think you'll see when you look at young people today, they're not intimidated by choice. They're empowered by choice, and they're able to handle it, maybe better than people at our age group. Mm-hmm.
I think I totally agree with you. Actually, it is beautiful that you can choose not to see. That's a lot of power. And if you can choose not to see, that means that we as an industry will evolve faster in providing the right advertising to the right person at the right moment. Mm. This is, what we all aim for. Even at the point in which advertising will be as good as content. That's what we should be aiming for at some point.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it gets confused. That's why it's how we label everything, but at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. It's how it looks like or how it's going to look like in the future.
So
it's very invigorating to really try to get to that point.
I'm not sure I entirely agree that the ad model is so important. It is one of the major ways that businesses make money out of their content. You put ads around it, and I think we've agreed that it's pretty poor the way that we do that around digital media at the moment, but the opportunity is there to make it better. There's also then subscriptions and micropayments. So people are willing to pay, and people do pay money not to have the ads. Mm. So you got a balance between the needs of those people who have to make money out of advertising, and that's their business model, against those people who are thinking, how do I monetize my content? You've got three options. So there is a choice there. It's not all about the advertising. Mm.
I think we've probably got time for one more question, and there was a gentleman here I saw first. If we can get the mic to him. Oh, sorry. Well, okay. You're gonna get me into trouble. Okay. What's your question?
Yeah. Hi. My name is Badr Ward. I'm the CEO of Lamsa, which is an Arabic kids world focusing on edutainment. So carrying on the example that you gave out, when working with children, it's a different story, right? And we've been approached by a lot of brands to kind of, try to work on advertising or placing their brands onto our premium content for Arabic kids. And that's been something that's been worrying us. I mean, the trust, and then carrying on all of the comments that you guys just gave. I mean, what's the limits with trust, and especially when you're talking about kids, right? Adults can make their own decisions. They're comfortable with that. You mentioned about kids taking decisions, but then do you see it, what would be your advice to us as a company focusing on children and receiving a lot of, interest from brands, and then we don't want to dilute the kind of brand and the trust with the parents and the kids. So what would be your advice?
Transparency. Just be very transparent.
I also think the good thing is most of our business systems are set up to put the user first. If things aren't relevant, if things aren't valuable, the entire business falls apart. So when it comes to children, not only do things have to be valuable and useful, we also have to be mindful of what they're seeing. And I think every company here will say that we all operate under a strict set of terms and conditions that define what is acceptable and unacceptable behavior on our platforms. We all have operations teams that pay close attention to inappropriate behavior that falls outside of those rules, like impersonation or fraud or incitement of violence or things that are worse, like pornography. So I think all of us would say that operating within boundaries of acceptable conduct defined by our policies is very core to how we behave.
Sorry to have to cut off the questions. We're being told we're out of time. I'd invite you to, if you can grab our panelists at the end if you want to ask any other questions. But could you give them a round of applause, please, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us? Thank you.